I'd like to introduce Donal Ballance, who is a leading hospitality management consultant, native of Dublin, lately residing in Canada. So please give a warm round of applause to Donal. Thank you.
I'm all mic'd up here, I think. Can everybody hear me? Excellent. Oh, can everybody hear me? Yeah, excellent. Good. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to issue a couple of thank yous here. First of all, to Enda and Kira in having the vision to bring this to life. I think it's, a lot of people have been plowing this around in their heads for a few years, and nobody's actually brought it to fruition. And it's great to see so many people in this room here today who deliver a lot of happiness to a lot of guests every single day. And I don't know whether all of you realize that you do that, but in a ways that Italian restaurants and sushi bars and sandwich bars and so on can deliver, you deliver happiness to people. I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm going to be delivering a lot of information to you today, which is meant to kind of benchmark where Irish pubs lie in relation to the casual dining industry. I've been around Irish pubs most of my life. I've been a server, I've been a manager, I've been an owner, I've been a multi-unit owner, and now I've been a consultant for the last 12 or 13 years or so. It's been a great business to me, and I'm sure it's a great business for all of you. So, without further ado, has anybody seen this statement before? Anybody hands up? This was a statement which was made by a guy called Rocco Spirito on the NBC show The Restaurant about 7 years ago. And it was one of the most damaging statements to the restaurant business, in particular to the restaurant lending business. And even to this day, I don't know whether anybody in this room had a bank manager or somebody they were trying to get money for investment from. Has anybody ever said to you, 9 out of 10 restaurants could bust in their first year of operation? Yeah, it's a completely misleading misnomer. It's inaccurate, and it's utter tripe. Luckily, it brought the attention of a Professor H.D. Arza from Ohio State University. And what he found, he did a study of 2,500 restaurants in Columbus, Ohio, I should say. And he went through health department records and alcohol licensing records, and he found that the actual change rate in restaurants was about 1 in 4, and that over 3 years that number changed to 3 in 5. But the key words here are change ownership. When he dived into it a bit further, he found that about 50% of those restaurants actually changed ownership. So in fact, the failure rate wasn't 60%, it was about 30%, which is in line with the estimates for small business throughout the United States, which is around 32%. So it could be argued, actually, that the restaurant business has a better success rate than most small business. And as we go through this presentation, I want you to kind of think about a couple of things. First of all, for those of you heard Dave McGrogan, ask, who's got $500,000 this year from a bank for investment? We know how difficult it is to get money out there. And maybe we have to look at different channels to try and get that money, in which case we need to provide a compelling argument to people about how successful the Irish pub is when compared to its casual dining peers. So, when I was looking at these failure rates some years ago, I said to myself, why in an industry which has such a high failure rate, why does the Irish pub really have a pretty good success rate? To give you an example of that, I have opened about 35 to 40 Irish pubs in the last 8 or 9 years. I know of 2 that have changed ownership, and I know of 1 that closed its doors. So for me, there's a disconnect there. Why do we have a 30% failure rate in the restaurant business and a 2 to 5% failure rate in Irish pubs? Because that's a fascinating story when you think about it. In an industry which is, maligned by the banks and the lending institutions for being very, very high risk. It should make a good story that Irish pubs are good to lend to. So when I was thinking about this, I was having a conversation with Tim Cowlishaw from Diageo Guinness USA. And we were tossing around a few ideas, and we were saying, well, we know that the Irish pub is successful. We don't know why it's so successful. We know that you can drop it in communities of 12,000 people in Western Pennsylvania, and they'll do $3.5 million a year. If you went to a Chili's or an Olive Garden or a Brinker or Darden or Landry's or any of these guys, they won't go into communities that are going to provide them with less than 200,000 people or densities of 2,000, 2,500 people per square mile. But here we have Irish pubs able to turn 3 to 3.5 million in towns of 12 to 15,000 people and catchments maybe of 50,000. So we said, well, what would happen if we benchmark this, and how would we go about it? So in terms of finding somebody to benchmark it against, we looked at the NRA National Operations Report. Anybody heard of the National Operations Report? It's about a 300-page deep dive study every year conducted by the NRA and Deloitte Touche into 3 categories of food service. 5 to 15, 15 to 25, and $25 and upwards. And the intention is to break it down completely into three areas. The low performers, the medium performers, and the high performers. So this is where we started. We said, this is what we're going to use as our benchmark. We said, well, what are we going to do for Irish pubs? So very kindly, and quite a number of you are here in this room today, about 45 to 50 Irish pub operators from across the country participated in a SurveyMonkey piece of research, a survey. And all the questions that we asked the operators are all the questions that Deloitte Touche and the NRA asked the casual dining sector. Our poll was 45 to 50 pubs. Deloitte Touche looked across, I think, 1,700 restaurants. So I think the Irish pub was fairly, the data was fairly representative, and for sure the restaurant industry information was representative. So looking at full-service restaurants with this kind of spend, 15 to 25 bucks, $24.99. This is the playing field, or as I like to call it, this is the casual dining battleground. And some of the major players are listed at the bottom there, Landry's and Darden and Brinker and so on, OSI. And this is an immensely crowded category of dining. It's incredible. There are more brands than we actually need in there, I think. So the research objectives were to establish with conviction that Irish pubs are more profitable than their closest peers in the casual dining industry, and to identify the extent to which Irish pubs can be more profitable than their peers. So as I go through this, there are going to be a lot of numbers presented. Hopefully, I'll try and keep it interesting. I want you to think about your businesses and how you're operating right now. And when you see these numbers, you will either say to yourself, yeah, that's about where we are, or you will say, I don't know where we are, so I don't know what these numbers mean to me. Or you will say, you know what, there's a bit of a journey to go to get to where these numbers are. So the topics under scrutiny, amongst approximately a host of other topics, but the main topics that we're going to cover today: food to beverage ratios, food and beverage cost of sales, labor cost, which includes salaries, wages, and benefits cost, average spend per guest, and frequency of visits. And these are probably the 5 most impactful things that happen within a restaurant environment or a pub environment. So the first question we asked, we said, do beverage and food ratios significantly differ between Irish pubs and casual dining restaurants? And if so, how does that difference impact margin and profits? Well, we know the answer to that already. Everybody in this room knows that 40 to 60, 55, 45, 50, 50, those are the kind of numbers that we're achieving. And they contribute hugely to the profitability of the Irish pub. But in order to, what we wanted to do was to benchmark it against the industry. So here are the numbers. And looking at the best performing, so the lowest quartile here, we see that the ratio is around 35 to 65. Irish pubs, a huge number are in the 50-50 range. But the reality is that 56% of Irish pubs have a ratio of 50-50 beverage to food, and 83% have a ratio of 40 to 60 or better. And this is an absolutely phenomenal number, ladies and gentlemen. This is a huge contributor to profit in the Irish pub. So the thought that should run through your head here is if you're not there, well, then you need to have a look at perhaps where you could be. So whether that's driving late night sales at the weekends. I mean, there's some operators I've spoken to today I know who are struggling to get business after 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. Maybe adopt the Dave McGrogan approach and take a rhino approach to getting your beverage sales up. But across the casual dining industry, you can see the kind of numbers that are presented by a company like Brinker, 81.5 to 80.5%. So your advantage is that these guys don't know how to do this. They have teams at their head offices devoted to improving profitability. But all they're able to deliver every year is 81 to 19 food to beverage ratio. If they were to shift that needle by 10 or 15%, they would add 4 or 5% to their bottom line, which in their case is millions and millions and tens of millions of dollars. Food and beverage cost of sales. So we asked the same question, is there a significant difference between cost of sales in Irish pubs and cost of sales in casual dining? And if so, how does that potentially impact? So here are the numbers. And again, we're going to look at the best performing restaurants in the casual dining industry in this category, $15 to $25. And we see that for food, it's a little over 30%. For beverage, it's 24.7. Okay, pretty decent numbers. We all kind of have that number of 30 in our head for food and 24, 25 for booze. So let's look at Irish pubs. We see that a significant number of Irish pubs are achieving between 25 and 27% food cost of sales. We see that the vast majority are between 25 and 30. And on beverage cost of sales, we see that the predominant number of Irish pubs are at that great 23 to 25 number on food and beverage, on beverage. The implications of this is that the pubs can achieve combined food and beverage sales of between 27.5% and 28.5%. These are phenomenal numbers in an industry where the best performing across the industry, casual dining industry, in this category is 30 to 33%. So congratulate yourselves on doing a great job on your food and beverage cost. Salaries and wages. So we asked the same question. Do salaries and wages costs differ significantly in Irish pubs? You would think not. These guys like Brinker and Darden, they have labor cost specialists working at their head office, figuring out how to do jobs quicker, cheaper, faster, etc. Well, here are the numbers. The best performance in the casual dining industry is at 30%. If we look at Irish pubs, we see that 61% of Irish pubs have a labour cost of less than 25%. Across the industry, we see that the averages are 31.4 for Darden and so on, down to a low for OIS at 27%. 22% of Irish pub operators are achieving a labour cost of less than 22%. So there's a pattern to all of this, and part of the pattern is the food and beverage ratios. If you keep those beverage ratios very high, and if you drive them and drive them and drive them, they drive every other cost down because you've got a lower cost of sales in your beverage, you've got a lower cost of labor in delivering. You can have a bartender putting out $2,000 an hour between 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock in the morning. But you're going to need a team of 6 people in the kitchen to put out that much worth of food. Average spend. So average spend is something that we try to work out all the time. So let's look at how we benchmark it against casual dining. So you can see that 47% are between 16 and 20. 21% are between 21 and 25. The industry average, as you can see, is from 17 and 25 with Chili's up to $20 with Outback. But over 73% of Irish pubs have an average spend over 21 bucks. And I would hazard a guess that the people, the owners and managers in this room who actually drive average spend is probably in a vast minority. So somehow or other, Irish pubs drive average spend in a way that casual dining can't. Frequency of visits by guests. Teams of people at these big restaurant companies work hard at figuring out how often they can get people back in to visit. Well, guess what? The Irish pub does it without blinking. These are numbers that if you showed them to executives in the casual dining industry, they would not believe these numbers. The idea that somebody would come back more than twice a week, that 53% of guests would come back more than twice a week for drinks, or that 33% of guests would come once or twice for food. The average expectancy for a Chili's customer to return is about once every 3 months. So in summary, looking at food to beverage ratios, no matter what category you look at, whether it's under 15 bucks, whether it's 15 to 25 or above, Irish pubs perform phenomenally better than anybody else. In terms of cost of food and beverage, Irish pubs perform better than anybody else, 28.5%. Cost of salaries and wages, 61% of Irish pubs are at 25% or less labor cost in a world out there where the average is about 30 to 32%. Average spend per person, 74% of Irish pubs are beating the best of what casual dining can do. The implications of this are that if you compared casual dining restaurant and an Irish pub, both with sales of $2 million bucks, the research would strongly indicate, but it would prove, to be very honest, that an Irish pub can deliver incremental before-tax profit of between 5 and 10%, or 100 grand to 200,000 to 200,000. This is a phenomenal amount of money. Absolutely phenomenal. So next time you're having a conversation with your bank manager or when you're approaching an investor group, these are very revealing details on why the Irish pub is as successful as it is. You know, a lot of it is because they're owner-driven and they run them well and there's character and personality involved in them. But the numbers, you know, just support that story. So not only have you got great people, but you've got a great business model as well. I have, this presentation is about a 200-page presentation. It's a